Hello and welcome to Discovering True Health, your weekly deep dive into health and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, as always, please hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a lot, and you'll stay up to date on all our upcoming shows. You can also check out additional information on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. All those links are below. So unfortunately, in our modern world, our air, water, soil, household products, and foods are full of toxicity. Consumer Reports has recently done several studies and found very high amounts of heavy metals in many brands of spices, baby foods, and dark chocolate. Now, a lot of this is coming from over pesticide and herbicide use, as well as big industries like the aluminum and phosphate fertilizer industries that are pumping out toxic waste into our air and soil. And this is not only depleting our soil of vital minerals and nutrients, but it's also leaving behind heavy metals like lead and cadmium, which are absorbed from the soil into our foods. So today we'll be learning how to detox from heavy metals and toxins the right way to in turn improve our health and longevity. So my guest joining me today is Dr. Christopher Shade, founder and CEO of Quicksilver Scientific, a science-based supplementation company that specializes in creating bioavailable products, and their products focus on areas of detoxification and cardiometabolic protocols, immune health, longevity, and hormones. And Dr. Shade is also an international speaker and educator on the topics of mercury, environmental toxicities, neuroinflammation, immune dysregulation, and the human detoxification system. So thank you so much for joining me today. This is such an important topic to discuss as we're getting more and more information of how toxic everything is around
Yeah,
us.
thank you, Christy. I'm happy to be here. As I've gone through my career, I started all in the toxins and I started talking about other things. And as it's kind of come full circle, you see the toxicity and detoxification is core. You want longevity, you want your hormones to work well, you want all these health optimizations. It's not until you get rid of the trash that's in there, and we're putting more in day by day. I mean, we've had all these train derailments and fires and now we got wildfires. I mean, there's the toxic soup is kind of at an all-time high right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I'd love to hear your story as well. But first, you mentioned that, we can't kind of shift into longevity without cleaning all that up. What's the importance of this? How important is detoxing as far as those that want longevity and
Yeah, I mean that's a great leadoff question. We just did a study now as backfill. I go to every year. I go to the A4M. It's the American Anti-Aging Association of Medicine, and I'm right in the thick of all this biohacking and longevity, and people are doing peptides and stem cells and exosomes and hormones. And we just did a study where we took 40 people and we just detoxed them for 3 months. And there's a lot of measures now around biological age versus chronological age. These are measures of methylation of your genes, and it's called the epigenetic age. And we're looking at people's epigenetic age, and we're able to reverse epigenetic age just with detoxification. You take this stuff out. In fact, I have this old study from the 80s where they did mice and they just gave them 10 days out every month. They would give them this huge dose of charcoal to clear everything out of their systems. And the mice who had the charcoal that were detoxing, for a good chunk of every month, they lived 40% longer than the regular mice. We think that detoxification is just when we're really sick, we need to get something, out of us and get ourselves back up to functioning. But you want to get into all that longevity stuff. You want to do these high-end therapies. You better take the trash out or you're going to throw. And I know people, they've done all the stem cells and exosomes, everything, nothing works. You look at them, they're hugely toxic. You clean them up and then all this stuff starts to work.
wow, that's such a great point. Because yeah, I mean the mindset, we get into the health space and longevity space and the wellness space, and if we don't start with this
It's
detox,
the
getting
most
it out.
fundamental thing in the health space.
Right. Yeah, and it makes so much sense. And like you said, there's all these modalities now we can, improve our wellness, but if we're not starting with
A
cleaning up
clean
first,
slate.
yeah.
Yeah, we can put paintings on our walls, but if we haven't vacuumed in 3 years, it's freaking gross house.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. So let's hear a bit first about your own health journey, because I
Yeah.
think that's interesting. You had issues with mercury toxicity and you've really become an expert on mercury. So kind of tell us about your journey, how that led to your interest in detoxification, and then in turn creating your company, Quicksilver Scientific.
Yeah, it goes way back as people like to think that you wake up when you're 5 years old and you want to save the world and you go off and this is what I'm going to do, but that's not how it usually goes. You have these circuitous journeys, and I did have this thing in college where I was like, I want to do organic farming, and it was after some LSD and this and that, suddenly you're open to this bigger world, and I got way into this natural health thing, and I saw my immune system wasn't really working right, so I was like, all right, I started taking herbs and stuff and doing sort of early detox, and then I got into organic farming. I was a biodynamic farmer for a while, and I was like, well, this is really going to change everything. But it didn't totally change how my health was. I mean, I was young, and so I was I had some energy, but then I eventually got married and I had kids, and I would notice, and I went to graduate school. I left farming. I joked that I got out of farming the year that Whole Foods was formed. Like, there was no money in it. This is like the early 90s when I was doing it, like 91, 92. And so I went to graduate school, and I noticed, when I went out and traveled, I would come back, I would get sick. When my kids get sick, I would get sick. It was just like, I wasn't that resilient for, a guy in his late 20s, early 30s. And then I started and so then the irony is I'm studying mercury in the environment. We're measuring mercury in these little like bugs and fish and animals. We're like, oh, the poor animals. And we got this mouthful of amalgams. And I remember asking one of the guys on my thesis committee once, like, well, what do you think of all this shit? And he's like, that's fine. Like, seriously, we're measuring these minute amounts in the environment, and we're worried about this little freaking, mosquito and his mercury levels, and the spiders and their mercury levels, and you have grams in your mouth. And he goes, well, they've been doing it for a long time. It seems all right, and there's really no alternatives. Now, at this time, you could have the mercury in there, or you could have 30 different varieties of composites, which are polymers like epoxy that goes in there. That's what the white fillings are now. But these people who are supposed to be thinking about these things are just ignoring it because it's status quo. And so then I started my company, and while I was in grad school, I had this like opening where I was like, oh my God, I feel this stuff. I feel it just like dripping down my throat. I feel the weight of it on me. And I couldn't shake that. It was just always with me. And then I got out of school, I started my company, and I was going to go into, I started doing environmental testing. I want to go into clinical testing. I started measuring stuff in people, and I came out with my first supplement. And it was for absorbing mercury in your GI tract, just pulling all the mercury like a magnet down there. And before I even made this, I was trying, like I started trying the chelators, DMSA and DMPS, and now I got all my amalgams out in one fell swoop. Just take them out, like all the things you're not supposed to do. And now I'm taking the chelators, and I'm measuring the mercury coming out my urine, and like nothing's coming out. So I just keep taking more chelator, and my adrenals are just wasting away. My brain is wasting away. I'm just so sick as I'm just stirring this pot of metals all around me. I'm just moving it all around, and I'm just a freaking disaster. But at the same time, I'm going to these meetings locally, the Colorado Functional Forum, and all these doctors are coming in, and they're talking about GI immune, liver GI immune. And I'm like, why am I trying to push all this stuff out through the kidneys when I probably should be dragging it through this liver GI thing? And I made this first supplement, these silica particles. It's kind of like covered with a chelator. So it stays in the GI, and it just pulls everything through the liver, through the bile ducts, into the GI. When we talk about detox, we'll see that that's the key. You have to move things out of the liver with the bile into the GI, and you need to bind it then. You need something to grab it. And I was just a total mess. And I had this insight that I should be pulling everything through the GI, and that I had the materials to do it. I used to make these materials to pull mercury out of water. And so I made them to eat. And in a couple of weeks, it fixed everything. Taking it all out through there fixed everything. And soon I saw, when I travel, I don't get sick. When my kids get sick, I don't get sick anymore. My resilience popped up like 1,000-fold. I'm like, God, this is the way we're supposed to live. And this is one of the most interesting things. We totally undervalue how powerful the psycho-emotional effect of the toxicity is. I mean, one of the things I saw, when you have amalgams, you're swallowing all this mercury, it's polluting your whole GI. And what I found is that I was closed in around my GI tract. And my chiro at the time, who was running these functional medicine forums, who talk about the toxic response. And he said, when we're toxic, we push it out on people around us and blame them. And it comes into all of our little actions. We're closed in. We're not open up from our hara, from our dantian into the world. We're not communicating. We're closed off, and we're accusing everybody subtly all day long for our toxicity. And the worst part is when you offer people, because people will come up to me and be like, they're all kind of paranoid. And they're like, I don't know, I got these symptoms. Am I toxic? And you're like, absolutely. Here's the solution. And they run away. People make stories in their head to hold the toxicity in. It's like a consciousness within us that closes us off from opening into the world and having communion with everybody. It's the thing, one of the things that keeps us separate and in our constant war with the world.
Wow, that is incredible. Fascinating. I mean, it makes so much sense, because a lot of times we talk about the microbiome now and how important that is. And sometimes after studying that, you think, how controlled are we by these little?
You have more cells down there than you have in your body.
Right. So,
and that's possible because bacteria are smaller, but there's more of them, and they're in a consciousness, and they're in a communication with you, and they're controlling you. Now, you can control them too. It's a two-way street. And so when you change your mindset, you actually change your microbiome. But if you just let it control you, you just go down this weird path. And the toxicity controls the microbiome. The microbiome holds the toxins in. There's an alternate consciousness in you that's trying to keep you, like the darkness is within you. It doesn't even have to come from outside of you. You make your own darkness.
it's like this multi-dimensional. It's just not in the physical plane. It goes into like the emotional, mental, spiritual.
Totally. And then, these people that have that toxicity and have that darkness, they start bringing, spiritual entities around them. They start bringing things into their field, which perpetuate the negativity.
Yeah. And we're seeing that more and more. And the more toxic our world is becoming, we're just seeing so much more darkness. I mean, it's insidious, and it makes so much sense.
And it grows on itself.
Right. Wow. Fascinating. Now,
what's the good news?
some mindsets are, we just change our diet, cut out the toxins, take out things like sugar, alcohol, processed foods, food sensitivities, and allow our bodies to naturally detox. What's your take on that kind of mindset? And is actual detoxing like a protocol necessary?
It's necessary. It's just, the way that the whole situation perpetuates itself. Yeah, we want to move into this, like, I'm leaving this clean lifestyle, and that's opening you up to move more toxins through. But we have big stores of them inside. And for most people, we have to go into a formal detox and hit all the right triggers and dump all this stuff out. It was like when I put together a detox for Tony Robbins. He started eating tons of fish until he was massively toxic. Yet he had otherwise you'd think it was a perfect lifestyle, and he has all these trainers around him, and there's cooks and stuff, and everything's really clean, but he was taking in so much toxin because he was eating high off the food chain in the fish that he ended up toxic. And so that's the long-term lifestyle, is avoid toxins as much as possible without making it like an obsession, and that will keep your levels lower, but you need to, one, do a formal detoxification, and two, incorporate detoxification into your lifestyle more than just saying, oh, I eat healthy and I drink some lemon juice and water once in a while.
That's interesting. You said, is there some sort of balance between like focusing on detoxing versus mitigating and prevention that
Oh, it's just like everything.
it's
What's
like
in balance in your
balance?
life, you know? And so when I go out shop, dominantly I'm buying all organic stuff. Occasionally there's, something like an avocado, something where you got to get inside of it. It's not as big of a deal. It's not sitting on the outside, but mostly you're eating organic. You're trying to balance lots of vegetables and fiber and stuff, and you're getting the cleanest meats you can. But it's like sometimes I would, back when gluten was a big thing, it was like everything had to be gluten free. I'd go out with these functional and integrative doctors, and everybody's like, you're at a restaurant, you're in Vegas or something at some conference, or you're somewhere in Florida, and there's only so much control you can have over things. And they're like, oh, is that gluten free? And is this free range? And is that that? And it's just like, just fucking order it and eat it. Because there was it was one of these early Gnostic gospels. It might have been the Gospel of Thomas, and these guys are asking Jesus, what shall we eat? How shall we fast? And he said, eat what's given to you. You will pollute yourself far more with what comes out of your mouth than what goes in.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Right on, like bless the food, eat it, be happy.
Right. Right. And I'm sure you're
But then at home, when you shop, you have all these decisions. And when cleaning products are probably the most, something we have the most control over, and so you should be having simple soaps for cleaning your surfaces around your kitchen. You got to have a bottle of 409. You got to have some bleach at home, because sometimes you got a serious mess you got to clean up. And sometimes chemistry is the only thing that gets through that. But you don't just go hosing everything down with that all the time. And so you have those decisions, your cosmetics, your creams, your moisturizer. You have those decisions to get away from the parabens, to get away from all these different preservatives in there, and get to a simpler solution. And there's great stuff on the market now in the organic world for skin. I mean, really, really nice stuff. And so those are where you have, cleaning, skin, food. That's where you have decisions. Otherwise you got to just roll, because this stuff's coming into you all the time. It's coming through the air. You go to work, I'm lecturing to these doctors in these hotels, and it's just like, how many things have been sprayed in here? Like, this is the grossest room in the world. You have to be detoxing all the time. You need your system, because, there's a lot of studies that I use to teach from, where you can expose a cell culture, an organism, to a certain amount of toxins. And if you have their detox system working well, nothing bothers them. If you suppress it, it kills them. So that just shows you have a dynamic ability to deal with the stuff that's coming into you. So if you're always raising that ability, draining the liver, turning up the internal detox system, then you're able to deal with the stuff that's out there.
That's like foundation. Boom.
Foundation.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Tony Robbins story, and he was kind of inadvertently eating a whole bunch of fish, which is packed full of heavy metals.
Yeah, he went from being a vegan to being paleo. And, these guys who've always eaten of the leaf, they can't go to the hoof. It moves and it moves and it buys, and it's like an animal, and it's like them. And so they stop at the fish. And, for whatever reason, their group thought, well, eat high on the food chain, because the heavy metals sink to the bottom, and we'll buy it all from a spiritual place like Hawaii. It was like, that's where all the Chinese mercury from the coal drops right down in there, man. And that shit's screaming high. And it was swordfish and tuna. Mercury bioaccumulates up the food chain. I mean, you can eat sardines and kippers and anchovies every meal of your whole life and never be mercury toxic. But, tuna 3 days a week, and that was like 10 days a week, 10 times a week for him. So that just burned him out.
So what are, for those listening that aren't as aware of all these different toxins, where are we finding them? You said, we talked about products, some of the fish, where are we exposed, just so we're aware? if we want to.
So mercury, you're exposed from the silver fillings are 50% mercury, they're not silver. That was for a long time our dominant source of mercury into the human body. And that's got two aspects to it. There's a vapor phase that comes off of it that you inhale and you absorb 80% through the lungs. And then there's like a rust, a corrosion products that you're swallowing all the time. You don't absorb those into the blood so much, but what they do is they coat the GI, they poison it, and they block the liver to GI detoxification route. There's a signaling that goes from the GI back into the liver and the body that says, we're a little polluted down here. Don't dump stuff down here. It's kind of like, that's why constipation is so bad for people. That gets polluted, it stops all detox. So the amalgams have that dual aspect. Then the other source is the fish. That's kind of the bigger one now. And the farther up the food chain you go, the more the mercury. And so people have kind of been like, oh, tuna, I got to be careful. Swordfish is high. So like, I'll eat Chilean sea bass. Just as high, man. Chilean sea bass is really high. Not all sea bass are high because the bigger the fish, the more the mercury in it. And so like I was just in Turkey and I was eating sea bass like this big. I'm like, I could eat these all day long. They'll be low mercury. But you get the big ones and those big steaks, you're going to have a lot of mercury in it. It's just like salmon, like a coho or a sockeye or a pink. They're all sort of in this range. They're kind of low. And then a king, they taste the best, but they start having a pretty high amount of mercury in them. So you don't want to eat them all the time. So that's where that stuff's coming from. Arsenic. There's a lot of, like more industrial sources. One of those outdoor wood playgrounds that have kind of a bluish green tint to them. They've been preserved with a copper arsenic blend. And you'll see kids with arsenic from that. And then in the food, it's in non-organic chicken. The arsenic is used as it's like an anti-parasitical or an anti-microbial that they just put on the food and then ends up in the flesh. There's arsenic in rice, which is kind of a bummer. And that you don't really have a lot of control of because that's a geologic source. But rice does accumulate arsenic. And then water, groundwater in certain states. In New Hampshire, Vermont, there's a lot. In some of the Rocky Mountains, there's a lot. And those are geologic sources. And then lead, you've got old lead paint, there was the leaded gasoline, that's pretty much out of the way now, except if you're near a regional airport, they still use leaded gasoline in the small planes and they use them in all the race cars like NASCAR and shit. And so the people that we see the highest are either on that race circuit, but the highest of the highest that come in are from gun ranges. Because there's still lead bullets, and they pack their own bullets, they make their own bullets. And then the guys who work on the ranges, who run the ranges, they have massive, massive levels.
Wow. I never would have thought of that. And I just learned recently that the fluoride they put in our to our drinking water in the United States actually has arsenic in it as well. So
yeah, fluoride's a real issue. And I haven't tracked down all the different things, but there was some connection to nuclear power and why we use fluoride, because we need fluoride to process the uranium or something for nuclear power. Exactly. And so we end up with all this fluoride, and then one way to use it is to put it in the water supply.
Right. It's a way to
and say it's for the tea.
It's polluting the air and soil. So what are we going to do? Oh, let's add it to our water supply, and then we don't pollute the
put
air.
It in the water. Water's better than soil.
Yeah, right.
Have people drink.
Right. So logical. Now, for someone who's never detoxed before, is testing for toxins a good starting point? What do we need to know about testing, or are symptoms a better marker for toxicity levels?
Well, that's a great question, and both are true. I mean, it's nice to test. The problem is we've got like 1,000 toxins out here in the environment, this soup that we're exposed to. And so many are very similar, have the same, like if you have a low level of 100 different things that hit the same target, that's a high level of things that are hitting this one target. A lot of the toxins have similar pathways that they hit. And so if you distribute it amongst, 100 different toxins again, but they're low levels, but there's 100 of them, you have a really strong effect. And so there we're arguing for symptom-based, like I feel crappy, I'm tired, things aren't working, my brain's foggy, I can't get the energy up, or I have anxiety and fatigue, like then you need to detox. Now on the same level, it's good to know if you have the money to test and you can test a whole bunch of stuff, you can see if there's one that just sticks way out and it's your exposure and you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was spraying this stuff on my grass, or I was, I bought this big gym set up from China and it's all been preserved with antimony and this or that, or I'm near this airport and I have this, or I'm near these agricultural fields and I have this pesticide in me. It's good to see those things and know what your biggest demon is, and you can focus in on that detox. But at the other side, if you don't see the big sore thumb sticking out, it doesn't mean you're not toxic and you shouldn't detox. And so priority number one is to detox no matter what. Priority number two is to test and see what the landscape in you is.
That makes sense. And I love your approach and methodology, because after COVID, I was pretty sick and ended up having the long haulers, and almost 2 years I was taking all this medicine. I worked with a naturopathic doctor. We changed my diet. We did the food sensitivities, cut those out. And I had been on a lot of medication. So she said, let's put you on a liver detox herbal supplement and castor oil packs to help the liver detox. So I did that. And literally by that evening, my entire back of my hands were like inflamed, red rashes. I mean, angry, looking terrible. And it wouldn't go away. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm just gonna stop the detox. Let my liver.
Detox has a terrible rap for all those things, and it's because they're not coupling. It's like a relay race. They're getting it to come out of the cells and move around. They're getting it to move, but they're not getting it all the way out through the liver, into the bile, into the GI, and they're not trapping it there. And it's that bile flow and the binder, coupling that to all the other stuff, makes it symptom-free. It makes it, you'll feel some stuff, but you're not going to blow up like you did.
Right. So what is the proper way? Then let's get into this. What's a proper way, and what are these phases? What do they look like? What do they entail? So we can get it.
So just like on a big scale, imagine you got cells, and cells in a grouping as a tissue. Then you got the blood, then you got the liver and the kidneys, and you got the GI tract. Right. It has to go from cells to blood into the liver, and the liver has to dump it with the bile. Nobody thinks about, what does the liver do with the toxins? It dumps it through the bile. That is the highway from the liver to the GI. It's the only thing that connects the two is the bile tract. And it's actually a tree. And so we have the common bile duct coming out of the GI. It's got that little bag that accumulates bile called, the bile sac, the gallbladder, and then it goes up into the liver and it branches out into it's like an upside down tree, and it's like roots of the tree, and they reach into every one of the liver cells, and every cell is fed by blood on one side to pull the toxins in and dumped on the other side with the bile. And bile is part of digestion, but that is where all the toxins come down. So you have to couple the movement from the cells into the blood to the movement into the liver and through the liver, through the bile, into the GI. Then when it gets to the GI, you can reabsorb a lot of those toxins. And that's where you need the binder. And so why our system is so effective, we use these delivery systems, liposomes and nanoemulsions. They're these little lipid nanoparticles, these little nano-sized droplets of oil that are holding the supplements. They go into your mouth, they start absorbing through your mouth, through your stomach, through your GI. They get into your body right away. They stimulate the cells to dump. They stimulate the liver to pull. They stimulate the liver to dump bile. And then a half hour later, you come in with your binder system. So binders are particles, this is essentially dirt that's going through your GI, and they grab onto the toxins and you poop them out then instead of reabsorbing them. So these are charcoals and clays. That's why I say it's, it's dirt-like. And, back in the day, we had dirtier food. We ate the vegetables with dirt still on it more. We were getting more of that in, and there's charcoal all through our soil columns because of all the forest fires and the wildfires that have been in there. So we're used to having these binders in there. So you get cell to dump, liver to pull over and dump into the GI, and then you bind it down there. And then for the kidney, you just got to make sure all that's flowing. A lot of water, diuretics to make that all flow. So once you isolate the whole system, I need binders in the GI, I need things that move the liver, I need things that dump from the cells, and I need things that move the kidney. Then you have this great detox where you're flushing everything out instead of circulating. Remember when I talked about me taking the chelators? My kidneys weren't ready to dump that stuff through. They were all poisoned. My liver and GI wasn't ready to take all that stuff. So the chelators just took the metal from a place where it was somewhat safely bound and just moved it all over the place. And that was what happened to you. You're doing the castor oil packs, you're doing this naturopathy, but it's not coupling to movement out of the liver, and it's not binding.
Right. Yeah, that makes so much sense, because I was, reading your research and work, and it's like, oh, binders and you also talk about the bitters.
Yeah, the push and the catch. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about that. What is push and catch protocol?
Yeah, and you totally got it. I mean, I see your questions. Like, you totally read all that stuff and you got the whole picture. You're like, I want to do this now.
Yeah.
And so bitters, why bitters? So we have, just like there's cocktail bitters like Angostura and Fee Brothers, you put that in your old fashioned and your Manhattan, they put it in all kinds of stuff. You just put it in soda water. Why were bitters the cure-all? Like, if you read the Angostura label, Angostura bitters was made in the Caribbean by an American or British, maybe British general or colonel or something. He had a whole group of soldiers there, and he was the doctor for the whole group. And he wanted one thing he could give to everybody that would improve the health of, hundreds to thousands of soldiers and keep them from getting sick. And he came down to bitters. So how do the bitters work? Bitters affect the bile flow out of the liver and increase bile flow out of the liver. And when the liver gets stuck, it doesn't move bile. That's called intrahepatic cholestasis. Cholestasis means blocking the bile flow. Intrahepatic means inside the liver. And bitters hit receptors on the tongue that influence the vagus nerve and open up the gallbladder flow. But if that was all there was, that would be fine. But it turns out there's bitter receptors in the stomach. All right, so then any bitters is going in there, but there's bitter receptors on the pancreas, which means we're supposed to get bitter compounds into us systemically. And in women, there's bitter receptors on the ovaries. Bitters are one of the biggest things for female health, to keep the flow, keep the stagnation from happening. Because what blocks the bile flow and then blocks detox? Stress does, yeah. Estrogen does. So estrogen blocks it, and progesterone opens it up. So we're all in flow with our hormones, everything's fine. But we tend, as women, women tend to, as women, women tend to get cholestatic. I do a lot of women's health, so I'm putting myself into the pool there.
You're empathizing. I'm
empathizing.
Yeah.
We tend to get into estrogen dominance, and then we get irritable and bitchy and stuff. That also blocks bile flow. And that's why it happens during pregnancy. It's called cholestasis of pregnancy. It's just these massive estrogen levels. And so all these different things block our detox, build toxins in the body. When the toxins build in the body, the immune system goes down, the mitochondrial strength goes down, the thyroid goes sideways, the adrenals get beat down, and the brain goes wonky. And so back to Angostura bitters, this guy was like, I'm going to give people bitters every single day. And Angostura was originally just made from herbs, and that was the formula. And that's how he kept care of, hundreds of soldiers, is just making sure that bile is moving. making sure that things are moving through. And then as we saw, in the pancreas, making sure the pancreas is keeping up with insulin demands. And who'd have thunk it, but it's also part of your normal cycling. In fact, I have two bitters. One's called bitters number 9. It was developed between me and a pharmacist, male. Two men made this, and we're like, this is the ultimate bitters formula ever. And then it was a small company then I had a bunch of 20-something girls come work for me with all of their Gen X toxins and their crappy periods, and every period was like hell, and bitters helped them, but it wasn't enough. I had to make bitters X, a stronger, more powerful bitter, because the women needed more. And I used myrrh in that one as the biggest driving force. And myrrh is used all through Ayurvedic medicine as a bitter detoxifier, but it's used in all of the gynecological formulas because, when they talk about moving blood out of the uterus, when you have amenorrhea or dysmenorrhea, you're not pushing enough blood out. The Chinese call that qi. You move the stagnant qi out of the uterus, and that's what myrrh does. But it also moves the stagnant qi out of the liver, which is the bile. So it's moving bile and it's moving blood. And, there's a whole thing there. Bitters are a huge part of all of our health. It is the long-term detox supplement, but it is so essential for women.
That is incredible. And I will say, I started taking them, I think 2 months ago, and I had these hand issues, like skin issues for over a year, would not go away.
Exactly what you needed. When you said that, I'm like,
went away. They went away.
Bitters.
The all of them went away when I started taking bitters.
Yep.
And a binder.
Bitters. Yeah, you were locked up. The post-COVID inflammation had locked the whole thing up. And, COVID screws everything up. But it creates a constant inflammation, and the inflammation blocks the bile ducts.
Right. No, not all.
Force them open with the stimulus of the bitters. And that's what you saw. It was like, oh, the skin stuff went away.
Yeah, went away. I was like, this was the key that I was looking for. You're the only
waiting for it.
The only person in the world that knows this. This is incredible.
Yeah.
So not all bitters and binders are created equal. What are some things that we need to know about, like, the supplement industry is a little crazy. What should we be looking out for with good quality, and what should they have?
What differentiates ours, when you get to like the bitters, like you can go to any of the herbal brands, Herbalist and Alchemist, Gaia Herbs, and you're going to find bitters blends, and those are good, but they're mostly striking the receptors on your tongue and in your stomach. We put them into these liposomes that go right through the oral space, right through your cheeks, under your tongue, above your tongue, right into circulation. And remember, a bunch of the bitter receptors are in the pancreas and the ovaries. They haven't even found them all. So you're getting more systemic. And in the liver, there's got to be receptors in there because it turns up the bile flow. It's not just through the vagal response from tasting the bitters. And so our differentiation is the delivery system. And then in the binders, you can go out and you can get charcoal. And if that's the only thing you're going to do, and you don't want to spend on our ultra binder, get some charcoal. But you have a lot of different binders, and binders are things that aren't soluble in your GI, and they grab things and hold them so you don't reabsorb them. Now, there's 1,000 toxins out there. They all have different chemistries. Binders has what's called specificities. If you have a high specificity for a toxin, a little bit of binder gets a lot of toxin. But if you have low specificity, a lot of binder gets a little bit of toxin. So you got to take lots of it. So you want a couple different kinds of binders to cover all the different chemistries out there. So we have activated carbon or charcoal in there. We have zeolite in there. We have some bentonite clay in there. We have something called chitosan, which is really good for mold toxins and toxins that can come from toxic algal blooms and toxic GI. And we have something called intestinal metal detox, which we make, which was my first supplement, which is specific for heavy metals. So when you use our ultra binder, you're grabbing lots of different toxins and taking them in. So that's the differentiation. But if you can't access our stuff, or you can't afford, it's very premium, get some charcoal, get a bitters herbal tincture, and get a kidney supporting herbal tincture. These will be diuretics. It'll be things like dandelion leaf, corn silk, cleavers, uber ursi. There's a lot that they use. In our kidney care, we use dandelion leaf, and then we use two specific Chinese herbal mushrooms, Fuling and Zhuling. They're really high end. And then we have some pure nutraceuticals, one called astragaloside 4. It's a specific molecule from astragalus that turns up regeneration of kidney tissue, and another one called ferulic acid. And so it's like ours is the Cadillac of things, but at the very least, you're going to get a bitters group, a bitters blend, a diuretic kidney blend, and a binder.
So those are kind of the top, most important.
Top three right there.
And you mentioned you had two different types of bitters.
Bitters number 9 and bitters X.
Okay.
Bitters number 9 has more digestive and stomach support. It's good before meals. It's like better than taking a digestive enzyme. And it does have bioflow effects. But bitter X, if you're really just detoxing, bitter X is stronger on the bioflow side. And, with women, they tend to, especially if your period's a little rough, you want the X.
Got it. And
it's a little weak, get the 9.
Are there do you also carry a couple different types of binders as well? Or is
there really variations on the same thing. Now, all right, we have Ultra Binder, which has all the different things in it. And then we have IMD, which is just after the metals. And then Ultra Binder has some of the IMD, but if you're going on a heavy metal detox, then you want to get some of the IMD separately and blend them together so you have more of this metal binding capability. And then in the binders, we have raw powder that you're going to put in like a protein shaker, and it makes this black water that has no taste, so you just drink it right down. But then for convenience, we also have capsules.
Got it. Okay. And now you've also created several types of detox kits. What are the different levels of detox you have? What are important?
I talked about bitters and binder as this quintessential bioflow binding. But if you remember at the beginning, I said you got to get tissue to blood, blood to liver, liver to GI to get the binder. So the bitters and the binder are just working from GI from liver to GI. But how do you upregulate the cells dumping into the blood? And that's where you need compounds that trigger a mechanism in the cell called NRF2. It's a little messenger that goes into the nucleus and turns up transcription of the genes for all of the proteins that run detoxification. So it's a immediate boost to cellular detox, and that throws stuff out of the cell. So how do you upregulate that? So lipoic acid is the biggest one that we use. So we have this formula called liver sauce. So if you looked at push catch liver detox, our basic system for the core of all the systems is this stuff: liver sauce and binder, the ultra binder. And in the liver sauce is bitters X and lipoic acid and some mast cell stabilizers like antihistamine compounds. All those go to, so there's milk thistle, lipoic acid, quercetin, luteolin, DIM, and bitters X. All those, the bitters X is hitting that bioflow, but at the cell level to turn up NRF2, that's what all the other compounds are doing. And the anchor for that is the lipoic acid. So that gets all those levels to go. Then what do we add from there? We're bringing the kidney care to support the kidneys peeing out, because the toxins, a bunch are going through the liver and then others are going through the kidneys. So you need both of those rolling. And then if you're really turning up detox, you're going to have a strong use of glutathione, and you'll be dragging glutathione out of the system. Your body makes glutathione. A lot of us don't make enough. And then when you're detoxing, it's a big drag on that. So we bring in liposomal glutathione. So you got liver, kidney, liposomal glutathione, your binder. And, from there, you can add other things to juice it up even more. If you're going after lead, you need to bring a liposomal EDTA. But if you just get to this liver, kidney, glutathione, binder, you have so much covered right there.
Wow. And for those that don't know, what role does glutathione play? How important is What does that do?
So glutathione is kind of the anchor to what's called the chemoprotective system, which has got antioxidant functionality. So oxidative stress that's building up from just respiration and metabolism, or from toxins coming in, winding up oxidative stress. Glutathione does that. Linking onto a toxin like mercury links onto glutathione, makes a conjugate, and then you have transporters at the cell membrane that recognize it, push it out of the cell, transporters at the liver membrane that recognize it, pull it in, transporters that go out into the bile that recognize that, push it out. And so glutathione is one of three molecules that's connected to, that's linked onto toxins to move them out of the system. And so it's central to detoxification. And then the thing that we miss, this would have been great for you when you're going through your COVID problems, is glutathione controls the immune system. When glutathione levels go down, your ability for specific inflammation against a target goes down. And what goes up is non-specific inflammation, where you start reacting to your foods, to allergens in the system, and you're like allergic and reacting. You just talked about doing food allergy testing. Yeah, when glutathione's low, you're allergic to everything. When glutathione's you're allergic to everything and ignoring the pathogens. And when glutathione's high, you're not allergic to stuff and you attack the pathogens. It's so essential. And then the last part of glutathione is aging. The telomeres, which are the end caps of the chromosomes, which go down with toxicity and age. There's an enzyme called telomerase that extends them. It's dependent upon a high glutathione level, and the glutathione all be in what's called the reduced phase, which means the enzymes for detox, once you use glutathione as an antioxidant, it becomes oxidized, then you need an enzyme to re-reduce it. When your whole system's up and running, you're keeping all the glutathione in the reduced phase, you're making enough of it, and it's controlling everything around you to the benefit. But when it goes down, and viruses drive that glutathione level down, and they drive the oxidation up, and you get into that spiral, it's hard to pull out of it. I mean, we found glutathione to be one of the most ameliorative things to COVID symptoms. It like brought people up and they stopped feeling like, I mean, COVID just sucked, but you could just like be dying sucked, or just like, well, this is flu-like sucked. And glutathione was all the difference for that.
Oh, that's so good to know. So when you detox, it will also start kind of depleting that. So you want to take
Yeah, because it's got, when you're using it as an antioxidant, you're recycling it. But when you clip it onto something and move it out, you're losing it. And so I always like to use liposomal glutathione during the detox.
Supplemented in there. That makes sense. Yeah. That is great information. Now, for someone who's never detoxed before, where's a good place to start? Should they go full detox? Are there baby steps for beginners?
Yeah, if they haven't done anything before and they're coming off a, pretty, mainstream American life, then we don't like to turn up the cellular level right away. We do what are called drainage. So you do the bitters, the kidney, the binder, but you're not having the lipoic acid and the quercetin to turn up the cellular level. And we often just go with vitamin C instead of glutathione, because we're just trying to open up the drainage pathways, and taking a lot of magnesium. Magnesium helps the brain, calms you down, but it drives all the enzymes that move all the toxins out, and it helps move the stool. When your bowels are sluggish, you cannot detox. And so magnesium is also a laxative. So we want to get things moving through. We want the binders in there. We want some bitters. We want some diuresis, and drink a lot of water. And just, you can start with that for a couple of weeks before you turn up the big thing. If you go into our systems, these premium systems, we have a protocol called pre-tox. And that's a month of doing that without really hitting the cellular store so directly. And then you can go into push catch or advanced push catch to really turn everything up and get it all out.
That makes a lot of sense. So you don't want to just start dumping toxins. You want to start slowly just opening everything up.
Yeah, open and drain, because you've got the cellular stores, you've got the blood stores, and then what's like built up in the liver and kidney. So first you clean liver and kidney and start bringing down the blood stores, and then you dump from the periphery. Then you get the tissues to dump.
Got it. And do we need to detox periodically, every so often? Is there a maintenance phase after a detox that we kind of stay in? What's your
Yeah, so there's what I call a formal detox, and that's going to be, 2 to 3 months of like really going after it. And you'll use one of our protocols or you'll build it all together. And then you're going to integrate it into your life. I mean, the simplest thing of them all, you get our binder capsules and the serious simplest thing, keep them on your bedside table and take 4 before you go to bed. And you can do that for long periods. I mean, for just endlessly. It's not taking things out of you like people worry about. It binds things, like if you take it with your food, it'll bind minerals and vitamins in your food. But otherwise, it's just taking toxins out. And so that's a long-term thing. Bitters is something that should just be built into your lifestyle. You take it before you eat, it gets your digestive juices going. You take it after you eat, it gets the bile going if you had a fatty meal. It's helping detox all the time. And so those are sort of the everyday things that you bring in, but like these things like the liver sauce, the kidney care, the binders, I have them. And yeah, there's times where I'm like doing them all together, and I'll do that with sauna. So I'll, take all my liposomes, get in the sauna, then take the binders. That's wonderful. And I can do that a couple times a week. I keep them around. I'm using them as periodic intermittent supplements throughout the week.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like timing is important when taking these specific supplements.
Yeah. And that's, that's what we call push catch. You take this stuff that goes in and moves these toxins out, and 30 to 45 minutes after you take the things that move the toxins, you need the binder to come in and pick them up.
Got it.
And, when you do that, I mean, I've been doing detox since, 2008, 2009. And we did a lot of work with autism, and they're very difficult to detox, and they're very reactive, and they're under all this sympathetic stress all the time. That's neuroinflammation. There's essentially an autoimmune thing going on in the brain that drives all of autism, and that's blocking this detox channel all the time. So they get very toxic, and then you give them anything, they react to it. And so we found that you had to get all this stuff in a row, push the toxins out, get them through the liver, bind them up, and you could go really deep into strong detoxes. And the other thing was quenching inflammation. So there's one thing to recognize, is that inflammation and detox are fundamental opposites. And when inflammation is up, it turns detox down. So when we're chronically inflamed, we're chronically accumulating toxins. So and when we got long haulers and stuff, that's this long burning inflammation, you're going to accumulate everything that you have in there. And the trick that we had for that was a liposomal CBD. The CBD we'd put that in first, and it would quench the inflammation. Then we give all the push stuff to move the toxins, and then the catch. And we did that CBD push catch. You could take these autistic kids into like adult style detox really quick.
Wow. That's interesting because I mean, with COVID and other chronic illnesses, inflammation is what's your immune system just starts working against you and just switches on this.
It doesn't know what. It's just like, kill it all. And eventually you gotta turn it down and get it back under control. But the toxic load is keeping it in the derangement.
It's building up because you've
and what you had before is in there, and then the immune system goes out of control, and it stays out of control, and then it makes more buildup, which keeps it in the out of control spiral. And so somehow you gotta like quench the inflammation, drain the toxins, get the thing back on track.
This sounds exactly like the key to long haulers. I mean, that's what you're saying is exactly what long haulers is. It's this chronic state of inflammation, and then you just keep building up toxins because you're not detoxing.
Yeah, and that's what we did with a lot of long haulers. We dropped the CBD in to bring it down and detox the hell out of them. And, we got into circulatory formulas because there's a lot of hypercoagulation going on.
Got it.
And that was really the key. And the biggest CBD product that we used for that was called CBD Synergies PN for pain. And it was CBD, curcumin, boswellia, and something called beta caryophyllene, which is a essential oil that is a cannabinoid. And those all together, I mean, everybody knows curcumin for inflammation. Boswellia was always paired with curcumin in India. And then you put that with the CBD, and it just like really turned things down really nicely.
Oh, that's important. Now, if we are detoxing properly, will there be any symptoms? Should they be less extreme if we're doing it right?
Way less extreme, you might have some headaches or some brain fog. It should be transient, it shouldn't be too intense. If it is intense, or there's bodily discomfort, or you just feel crappy and fluish, pull back to half dose, keep going, and then bring yourself back up. And that's usually all you need to do when you're symptomatic, is just lower the dose. But like the experiences you have, you won't have those.
Right. The crazy skin stuff that just won't go
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, because so why that is when you can't get it out of your liver, the
Mm,
liver starts accumulating it, and it's going to blow up. And so there's a back flush valve where you dump it all back into the blood. So the liver can't get it out through the bile, it dumps it all back into the blood. The kidneys try to pick up the gap, but the same thing that was blocking the liver is going to be blocking the kidneys. So what do you have? Skin. And first you'll be itchy, you'll find this itchiness going on, and that's the bile salts, because you have bile and toxins in the blood, in the liver. They dump back into the blood. The bile salts lodge under the skin and they start the itching. Then when the toxins start coming through, they hit the immune system and you get all the rashes. So the itching and the rashes is all a symptom of not moving the toxins out through the bile. And as you saw, you just got to bitters and boom,
fun.
it all up. And it's like, once you know the whole system
Yeah.
and the whole flow, the relay race, you're not going to get into trouble anymore.
Right. It's incredible. Now, you had mentioned a little, touched on this before too. For someone who's worked in a toxic environment for many years, let's say they're working with pesticides or they're in a gun
Yeah.
range and they're exposed to all this, these heavy metals and toxic chemicals, and they're maybe 40s and 50s, and they've kind of eaten a standard American diet, maybe not super healthy. Is there hope for them? Can they detox their body and kind of?
You can change everything. You can always change everything, and you can get all those out. If you've been exposed for that long, it's a longer run to go through it. It was like, there was some rule of thumb that the naturopaths had, like 1 week for every year you were exposed, or 1 month for every year you were exposed. It's probably a month. And so, if you've been into it for, 10, 20 years, it's going to take several months of concerted detox to bring all those levels down. And you get a lot of change in the beginning, like when you bring the acute levels down, but then like each week, each month you go through this, there's more and more of your native power emerging, more coming out that you're like, I didn't even know I lost that functioning. So you can do that. And those things, they take a long time, and you start from low doses and you work up to high doses. I say there's 2 ways to fail. You start too high, you move too much too quick, you feel like crap, and then you run away from the detox. So you got to start low. But if you stay low, you never get the results. The low gets things moving, gets you starting to feel better, and then you got to move up to the higher doses. And almost all of our protocols include some aspect of titrating from low up to high. So you can totally change everything that you've been exposed to. It's a matter of how long it's going to take.
Right. And is this kind of work as well for this now all this heavy metals we're finding in our spices and foods? Can heavy metals fully be removed?
Oh yeah, yeah. Now some of them take longer. Lead, because it incorporates in your bones, takes a
Right.
long freaking
Yeah.
time. That's sort of a forever. Well, not forever, but it's a decade plus. It takes 7 years to turn over the bone tissue, versus 7 days for GI tissue. And so lead gets in the bones, takes a much longer time. But even like a good mercury detox is not a week, it's not a month, it's 3 months plus.
Yeah. Now, I have also heard that intermittent fasting can also assist with detoxing. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? Is it a good way?
Totally. I love intermittent fasting. Doesn't always work for girls, because girls are always trying to make babies. It's just the biology. And so it's always trying to keep food on board. And some women can do okay with intermittent fasting, especially if you're older and you're sort of perimenopausal, menopausal. You should be doing that. But guys should all, intermittent fasting is great. Total water fasting is great. Carb restriction is great. exercise is great. Why all those things? They hit this trigger called AMPK, the AMP kinase, which triggers you to go in and starts a process called autophagy. That's where you take either you're taking fat, turning it to ketones for energy, or you're moving glycogen out and using it for energy. You're recycling your own energy. And then for protein, for structure, you're going into old, worn out cells and cell parts and breaking them back down into raw materials and reusing them. That is one of the most important parts of detoxification, is detoxifying our own inner waste. Like, we have old rotting parts of us inside of us, and we have to get rid of them. And I talked about that NRF2 that goes in and gets rid of the environmental toxins. AMPK and NRF2 are kind of like brother sister. When AMPK goes up, it's really easy to activate NRF2. So your body wants to do all that at the same time. Recycle inner, wasting parts and get rid of environmental toxins at the same time. And that's why intermittent fasting, exercise, carb restriction helps with detox.
And those toxins that our body creates, that includes endotoxins. You talk about that in your work as well.
No, it's mostly like misfolded proteins and broken down, like old mitochondria that don't work, old parts of membranes that don't work. That's the autophagy part.
Right.
Endotoxin it's inner toxin is what that literally translates to, but that's not actually from our metabolism. That's from it's pieces and parts of bacteria from our GI tract or from our oral cavity, like periodontal infections, getting into the blood. And these parts of bacteria, like if E. coli, which lives all through your GI tract, gets into your blood, what's that? That's sepsis. And it winds up inflammation big time. So even when it's parts of bacterial cell membranes and not a whole bacteria, your immune system has pattern recognition. It could recognize those proteins and those membranes there, and it winds up inflammation like there is an infection. So that's what endotoxemia is. Leaky gut gives us that. Chronic UTIs give us that. Chronic periodontal inflammation gives us that. Chronic infections from old wisdom teeth or root canals give us that. Chronic nasal infections give us that. All that is creating this burn inside the body. That inflammation is blocking detox.
And that a detox will help facilitate that out as well.
A detox helps move that out, but then you got to go and you got to get rid of the sources. So you got to seal up the GI tract, and the detox helps with that. The binders bind up a lot of the endotoxin, but getting the AMPK activation from the intermittent fasting and the exercise, NAD supplementation, that seals up that lining. And then you got to get in, you got to clean up all these areas. You got to clean up the sinuses and make sure that's not happening. Chronic urinary tract infections are really bad. So long term with mannose and cranberry, you got to make sure estrogen levels are right so that you can fix all of that plumbing inside.
That makes sense. So it's not only detoxing, but also finding the root cause of
the inflammation, whether it's coming from these chronic infections that are mouth to anus and the leakiness in there. You have to get that out of the way, because that's chronically retaining toxins.
Makes sense. Now, does a detox affect our microbiome in any way? Do we need to kind of simultaneously have a probiotic before and after?
I mean, it's always good to do the probiotics at the same time. You're creating a stability in the GI environment, and stability and low inflammation in the GI environment is essential to proper detoxification. And then when those toxins are coming down and landing in there, you don't want them to take your microbiota sideways. So the probiotic is just a constant stability in there.
And is that something that your company?
No, we don't make probiotics. There's a million great probiotic companies out there.
Yeah,
so it's like, I don't need to reinvent the wheel and have my own probiotic. That's not what I do. I do detox, and I do these lipid nanoparticle deliveries.
Right. And now once we detox and we're kind of getting our bodies on track with that, What are some of the ways that you have found to reduce toxicity in your own home and life that can kind of help us maintain?
Yeah, well, like I said, there you're making the decisions on the food that you buy,
Mhm.
cleaning products you have at home, the lawn products and garden products you have at home, the things you put on your skin. That's where you have decision making. But then in the house, we tend to seal up the houses too much and like let's hold all the air conditioning in, hold all the heating in, like just you know deal with less cool and less heat and open windows more. Uh, since the 70s, that was like the dawn of the insulate everything. And that gave rise to the mold generation because we're not breathing our houses anymore. And so the walls are filling up with mold. And then our indoor environment has all the molds. Rugs, we should not have carpet if we can help it. Carpet is like a bank of toxicity. It's a bank of microbial stuff. It's a bank of grossness. There's a million mites and stuff. Get the electron micrographs of that. It's just living, seething hell in there. And so we can make choices that way, or we can vacuum a lot. We can shampoo the rugs and get that all cleaned up. But it's really breathing the house, getting air. And then, there's the thing called earthing. Well, let me see, I'm going to grab one thing to show to you.
Earthing mats.
Earthing mats are awesome on your bed, on your workspace, and they're just creating a conductive layer between your feet, and those are the shoes I wear, and between your feet and the ground in your plug. So earthing mats are fantastic, but then you have decisions around EMF and electrosmog, and so your wireless router, one, you shouldn't have one, but we all do. You should have it far away from where you sleep. And if you can put it on a switch and turn it off at night, that is great because that is a real big issue. Your phone should always be on airplane mode and not sitting there on next to your bedside table. And that will stop that. And then this is cool. This is called a Stetzerizer. This dude named David Graham Stetzer was an electrician, and he was doing these build outs. He was working on these big buildings that were already there, and he was redoing electric, and he was finding these clusters where people would have cancer in these different buildings, like too many in one area. And he found what he calls electrosmog. It's a field of RF radio frequency coming out of the outlets, and it calls them microbursts, like the electricity is going.
Right.
It's not steady like that. And there's a field that comes out, and these Stetzerizers you put in, it comes with a meter to measure the microbursts, and you put a Stetzerizer on just that circuit, and it shuts all that down. And my one story around that, my friend who's passed now, Lisa Tully, brought these to my lab, and it's like, yeah, and she showed me a bunch of, like, here's your dirty energy, you got to put these in. And there was, in my conference room, there was a plant that was covered with spider mites, and it was just dying. And I'm like, ew, gross. And I didn't even think of it, but I put one of these Stetzerizers in it was right next to an outlet. It was right behind it. And I put one of these in, and I just went about my business, and I didn't have meetings for like a month. And I went in there a month later, and the plant was growing like mad. Everything was gone, all the pests were gone, and it was growing like that. It was the only difference was that I put this thing in the plug it was next to. It was really amazing. So at my house, in my office, I use these things. They're really good.
Doing that to a plant, what is it doing to our bodies?
Exactly. Why are we cultivating all these bugs all the time?
Yeah, it's a whole lot of extra plugs in our houses these days, and living in apartment buildings, everybody's got Wi-Fi. It's like I turn my off, but
you can read, you turn it on your phone and
or bars on everybody around.
But the force of the field decreases with the square of distance. So you get a foot away, it's lower. 2 feet, it's half of that. 4 feet, it's half of that again. So it just goes down, 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 down. So you want it at a distance.
Yeah, so at least turn yours off to minimize. Now, polypharmacy is a big issue in the United States. There's people on 10, 15 medications. For those people, because there's a lot of them, what do they need to know about detoxing? Is there kind of special?
They just have to, they have to do it. They have to detox. They'll need half the amount of drugs that they need now. But while they're going through it, they have to monitor stuff. Like if they're on clotting medication and you start, when you detox, you'll move the drugs through faster. See, the drug companies, they know that all these, what they call small molecules like Crestin and resveratrol, curcumin, they know they do massive things in the body. But one, they have to patent them, so it can't be natural. So they'll find what it works on, and then they'll make a variation of it that they can patent. And two, they go out of the body pretty quick. So they want a longer half-life. So they modify these molecules to live for a long time. So when you turn up detox, you're going to bring those out of the system faster. And so you have to monitor the clotting, they call the INR. You might have to monitor blood pressure and make sure, because you're at the end of this process, you're going to adjust down your meds. But that's where you want to get to. But you have to do it consciously if you're on polypharmacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I saw kids on polypharmacy in autism all the time. There'd be so many different things. And you would just turn up their detox and they would do better. Now with the older person, they're more crutched up by this. And so you have to be more careful with it.
Do you have somebody checking you
But
out?
the doctor watching them.
Tracking you. That makes sense. Now, your products are scientifically created for optimal bioavailability and efficient absorption rates. Can you talk a little bit about how bioavailability and absorption rates make a big difference? Because there's so many, again, the supplement industry is not.
Yeah, like you can get a million mixtures of powders and capsules all over the place, but you look at something like quercetin, that's, emerged heavily during COVID for all the different things that it does. We use it for a lot of different things. But from the time you take your capsule to the peak in the blood, it's 5 hours. And so it's this low and slow building and dying of the blood levels. When what we do is we make these little lipid nanobubbles called lipid nanoparticles, the most common of which is called a liposome, and that's for water solubles. And then for fat solubles like quercetin, we use a nanoemulsion. And these little nanoparticles go right through the mucous membranes, right into absorption. You'll peak in the blood in 20 to 30 minutes after you take it. And that's how our whole push-catch thing works. Everything goes in together and hits the targets, activates this movement, moves it out through the bile, and then you come in with your binder. It's very tightly controlled because of this delivery system. Whereas if you took it all in capsules, the lipoic acid would come in faster, the quercetin slower, the berberine even slower, other things in between. And it's just all over the place, and it's happening all day at different levels and different amounts coming in. We focus everything in together onto the targets, get our job done, and then the stuff is gone.
All about timing.
Yeah, totally.
Now,
do your job and out.
Yeah. Now, your products are on your website. We'll post a link to that below. Do you have any other resources you want to share that you have available to people?
Anybody who's a practitioner, health coach up to MD, get a professional account with us. And then when you log in, you'll have access to all of our webinars that are in there, all of the technical resources, all the protocols, tons of education. There's an online learning module called Quicksilver Scientific Institute to teach you how to do all this stuff. Now, if you're a consumer, you can go to our YouTube channel, and there's 1 to 2 minute videos on every one of the products, tell you how to use them, on the protocols, tell you how to use them. Those are also on the website. On YouTube, there'll be lots of old archived lectures from me from all over the world talking about these principles of detox. So there's a lot of education out there. You just got to dig in a little bit to it. And if you're a practitioner, we lay it all up for you.
Wonderful. Well, as I said, the link will be below. You can check out his products. He's got a really great selection of all things detox, so definitely check that out. Before we get wrap up the show today, do you have any final thoughts or words you want to share about detox?
Yeah. Your mind stream is the most potent thing that you have towards allowing detox. It's allowing, releasing, letting go. In our mind, there's what's called the autonomic nervous system is behind the scenes controlling everything. And there's the sympathetic or fight or flight side, which is when you're on it and you got to do something. And when you're there, you shut down all these regenerative and detox processes. The other side is parasympathetic, when we sit down and relax, eat, rest, digest, repair, regenerate, detoxify. That's all on that side. So if you're always locked up and you're always stressed out, you're not going to be able to detoxify. And if you're approaching detox like this thing I have to do, and I got to do this now, you're not going to be able to detoxify. If we can't let go of the things that are said to us, the things that are done to us, if we can't let go in our minds and we ruminate and we lock onto things, how can you let go of toxicity? How can you let go of disease? So opening up, breathing, calming, rest, digest, Tai Chi, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, those are the keys to get into the chemical kingdom so that you can actually work those triggers. And if you can't get your mindset straight, there's no amount of chemistry that's going to fix everything.
Holistic process. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today. This was so informative, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Christy.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about your body, the better you're able to stay healthy and prevent disease. If you like this video, please like and share with others. This information could really help somebody you may know. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you all next Wednesday on the next episode of Discovering True Health.